Hey everyone, it's Sarah here. So I'm back with a couple of videos for you. I wanted to do a series on Lightbringer theories to go along with the Azor Ahai theory that I posted a little while ago. So just to begin, there are so many theories about Lightbringer, so I'm going to do a brief overview about all of the options here in this video, but I've also made more in-depth videos for the few that I think are truly possible, which I will link along the way. So in A Clash of Kings, we find out that in Ahai, a prophecy says that when the stars bleed and the cold wind blows, a warrior shall draw from the fire a burning sword. That sword will be Lightbringer. The one who draws it will be Azor Ahai Reborn. So Azor Ahai is also known as the last hero, and also the prince who was promised, and he's famous for being the one to end the long night long ago with his famous flaming sword, Lightbringer. And to forge Lightbringer, he had to work for 30 days and 30 nights, and tempered it in water, but it shattered. So the second time, he worked for 50 days and 50 nights, this time tempering it with lion's blood, and it shattered again. And the third time, he worked for 100 days and 100 nights, and he tempered the blade by plunging it into his wife Nisa's heart, and thus creating Lightbringer. So we know that a hero in our current story is Azor Ahai Reborn, the prince that was promised, and this hero will presumably have Lightbringer, or a version of Lightbringer, on their side when they face off against the White Walkers. So if you haven't seen my theory video on Azor Ahai yet, feel free to check it out. I'll link it in the video and down below, along with some other conversations and videos regarding Azor Ahai and Lightbringer for your viewing pleasure. Basically, the most likely candidates for Azor Ahai seem to be Jon and Daenerys, and in this video, I plan to discuss theories about Lightbringer in the current story relative to Jon and Daenerys, and what Lightbringer could manifest as in the story to each of these respective possible heroes. So Lightbringer could be an actual physical sword or a metaphorical sword / weapon. The main theories I've heard include an existing Valyrian sword such as Dawn, Longclaw, Ice, or Dark Sister, and metaphoric swords or weapons such as the Dragonhorn, Daenerys' dragons, Winterfell, or the Night's Watch. I'm also going to share a personal theory about Dany herself being the actual Lightbringer. So just to quickly go over all of these theories, let's start with Valyrian swords. As far as existing Valyrian swords go, I don't think there are enough clues in the story to pinpoint a single Valyrian sword as Lightbringer of our current story, and I believe they were all forged after the Long Night, following the rise of Valyria, so I'm not sure that they'd really have been around for the Long Night originally, but they could be for this next Long Night, because we do know that Valyrian steel and obsidian, I guess things made with dragon fire, do work against the White Walkers as weapons. So let's start with Dawn. I firmly believe that Dawn, the ancestral sword of House Dane, was the original Lightbringer. So check out the detailed theory here. I've made a longer video that goes more in depth about this, and if you're interested, I would highly recommend it. Basically, Dawn is not made from Valyrian steel, but its properties are very similar to Valyrian steel, with the exception that it is milk white and much older than the invention of Valyrian steel. Dawn is aptly named if it was Lightbringer, as it ended the Long Night and represented the dawn of a new age. House Dane is also extremely old, and it fits in with the timeline of the Long Night. That being said, just because I think Dawn was the original Lightbringer doesn't mean it will be Lightbringer this time around. This may be because the hero needs to forge their own sword. It's also possible that Dawn will resurface and be Lightbringer once again. However, since Jon and Daenerys hold no proven ties to House Dane, I'm not so sure we will see Dawn in action again. But you never know, because Dawn seems to be an important sword in the series and pops up every now and again. It must be for a reason. Other options is Dark Sister. Dark Sister has been missing for many years, and even if it does turn up, nothing in particular makes it a special sword, and a sacrifice was not made to forge these swords. Some people believe Jon will use a sword to stab Melisandre, and when he kills her, her internal fire will be transferred to his sword and thus create Lightbringer, but we have no evidence to support this is going to happen. Second option is Ice, which has now been forged into Oathkeeper and Widow's Wail. Ice is a notable candidate, as Ice is the sword of Ned Stark, which was melted down and reforged into Joffrey's sword, Widow's Wail, and the sword Brienne has, called Oathkeeper. In A Storm of Swords, Jaime has a dream that suggests that Ice, or its reincarnations, could be Lightbringer. He's deep beneath Casterly Rock when, in the darkness, his sword begins to burn with a silvery blue light. He is then joined by Brienne, whose sword also burns with a blue light. This dream clearly holds some sort of importance, and as I strongly believe that Jaime is not Azor Ahai, this might be pointing towards Lightbringer instead, or perhaps it's a red herring or a metaphor for something completely different. These swords could work as they were originally forged as ice with water, presumably, and then reforged by the Lannisters, which could represent the lion's blood. I'm not sure how these swords being Lightbringer fits into the overall story, but it's something to think about for sure. I mean, Jon believed that he was a Stark his whole life, a bastard Stark, but still Stark, and his mom is a Stark, so for him to carry ice as his hero's weapon could totally be possible. There's also some notable swords in the Brotherhood Without Banners. Beric Dondarrion and Thoros of Myr have a flaming sword, which could be Lightbringer. I mean, it's the only actual flaming sword that we've seen other than Stannis' fake flaming sword, which I'm not even going to talk about. Others think that Gendry will forge Lightbringer. Back in King's Landing, he was apprenticed to Tobo Mott. Tobo Mott is from Qohor, the last society with the knowledge of the spells needed to work Valyrian steel. Now that he's with the Brotherhood, Thoros and Beric are vassals of the Red God and could be trying to reforge Lightbringer to aid Azor Ahai Reborn. Some think Gendry will temper the blade in a lion or Lannister, and perhaps in his love, which some people think could be Arya. So to move away from swords, I've also heard the theory that Winterfell could be Lightbringer, but I think it's a bit of a stretch. Some fans believe that Bran the Builder was the original Azor Ahai, and that since he forged Winterfell, this could have been Lightbringer, or metaphorically Lightbringer. It has an abundance of hot springs which could be considered the heat or flames of the sword. It is old enough to date back to the original Long Night, and it was forged 3 times, breaking twice. Once in water, or the invasion of the Ironborn, once in lion's blood, or as the Boltons took over Winterfell at the service of the Lannisters, and the third forging is yet to happen, but could involve the crypts of Winterfell, or Dany's dragons. Not sure how a castle can be an offensive weapon, but I guess it's possible. This theory does make the assumption that Bran the Builder was the original Azor Ahai, and that hasn't been confirmed in the story. And personally, like I've said before, I think the original Azor Ahai was from House Dane. Davos is another option that's been thrown out there. Some people think that there's a lot of sword imagery with Davos, and he's been reborn into a new role a number of times throughout the story. He's a good guy, and Melisandre even notices power within his blood, but I think it's more of a stretch for it to be Davos than for it to be Dawn or the Night's Watch. So the Night's Watch is another option. It's one of the stronger options, I think. The Night's Watch could be seen as a weapon, for sure, and there is some compelling evidence that suggests these men might collectively be Lightbringer. So take a look at the oath they must swear before taking the black. They say, "I am the sword in the darkness. I am the watcher on the walls. I am the fire that burns against the cold and the light that brings the dawn." This is very important. I mean, not only do the men refer to themselves as swords, but they refer to themselves as a fire that burns against the cold and the light that brings the dawn. And they agree to sacrifice their wives, or the ability to have a wife, in order to be a part of the Night's Watch, which can parallel the original Azor Ahai's sacrifice of his wife, Nissa Nissa. We also know that the Night's Watch has basically, since its beginnings, been fighting to protect the realm of men, well, except for the wildlings, from the others and other, I guess it's turned into wildlings, but I think its original purpose was definitely to protect against the others. Some have speculated Lightbringer might be an Ahai. These people believe Daenerys is Azor Ahai, and when Quaithe tells her she must pass beneath the shadow before going to Westeros, she might be referring to something she needs to get from there. So it could be that. I think that, if anything, Quaithe's telling her to go to Ahai because there's dragons there. But I think George R. R. Martin said we're not going to Ahai, so I don't think Lightbringer would really be there. The dragon horn. So Euron's dragon horn could be Lightbringer, as we know that he found this horn in the flames of Valyria, and a sacrifice must be made by the person who blows that horn. So the sound of the horn seemed to burn the insides of those who heard it, which is possibly also related to the blood sacrifice component of Lightbringer. And it's warm to the touch and reflects the light in its shiny surface, kind of like being on fire, I guess. But again, like, this horn was forged in Valyria, which rose after the Long Night, and there are many other magical weapons which require blood sacrifices and fire. I mean, again, it's certainly possible that something forged in Valyria can be the new Lightbringer, as I firmly believe Dawn was the old Lightbringer, so it fits the timeline better, but I'm still a doubter on the dragon horn. So, dragons. Dany has to use her husband's death to hatch her dragons under a bleeding star. They are literally fire made flesh and are deadly weapons that everybody wants to get a hold of. They would no doubt be useful against the White Walkers, and they are headed to Westeros right now. There are other theories that other dragons exist in Ahai, or under Winterfell, or on Dragonstone, or within the Wall, but if we want to look at the dragons as an actual fiery sword to fight the White Walkers, 100% a possibility. But what I believe is more likely, this is a personal theory and it's definitely a long shot, but since it seems clear that both Dany and Jon seem to fit the Azor Ahai prophecy, but if you've seen my Azor Ahai theory video, I feel like Jon fits the bill more likely at this point. Maybe Dany's part in all of this is that she is Lightbringer. I mean, she is literally bringing dragons or fiery swords west to Westeros, and fire is light. She was born or forged under a bleeding star, and she had to sacrifice Drogo, her own version of Nissa Nissa, which in turn made her stronger. Dragons will definitely help the battle against the White Walkers, and this would complete the Song of Ice and Fire with Jon as Azor Ahai and Dany as Lightbringer. I mean, alternatively, I might have had it completely backwards, and maybe Jon is actually Lightbringer and Dany is Azor Ahai. Rhaegar was obsessed with prophecy, and he seemed stuck on the prince that was promised, and the dragon has 3 heads. He was so obsessed with fulfilling prophecy that he ditched his wife Elia to be with Lyanna so that he could father a child who would be of fire and ice, and the prince that was promised. But what if he instead forged the weapon for the prince that was promised? I mean, the birth of Jon did include the death of Lyanna, arguably the love of Rhaegar's life, so there would be the sacrifice there. And I love the thought of Jon being Lightbringer because there are so many possibilities, and we haven't seen the whole story yet, so we're not sure what's going to happen. I mean, in the show, Jon was brought back to life. That could represent a second or third forging. I haven't really looked into this one too much, but I'd love to hear your ideas on it. So yeah, if you guys have any ideas or different views on what or who Lightbringer could be, as well as Azor Ahai, I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. Like I've said before, this is a part of a 4-part series, so this is my general overview video, and I'm going to be making more in-depth videos for the specific Lightbringer theories of Dawn, the Night's Watch, and Daenerys. Thanks guys for watching, I really appreciate it. Cheers.